Hello, my name's Claire Fisher. The presentation you are about to watch is the abridged version of a strategic thinking webinar that I ran for Dods Training on the 21st of July 2020. If you'd like more information about the content or would like me to develop something for your organisation along similar lines, do please get in touch and I'd be pleased to hear from you. And in this presentation, we'll be covering what is strategic thinking, why it matters in the public sector now more than ever, and describing 3 simple steps that you can take to make you a more active strategic thinker. My name is Claire Fisher. I'm a former senior civil servant and I now work across the public sector on public strategy and public sector leadership. If you haven't found my website, it's pashleyfisher.co.uk, where you can find more resources, including resources on strategic thinking. I've worked with Dods Training on strategic thinking programmes across Whitehall departments and in the wider public sector. So let's kick off by thinking specifically about what is strategy, and specifically in the public sector. This model comes from the Treasury's Green Book, and it describes strategy as a function of an organisation, where delivery is the what of the organisation, policy is the how, and strategy is the where. You might want to have a look at my policy skills series, also available on my website, for a little bit more about the policy function. But for today, let's think about what is strategy. So strategy in the public sector is the answer to the question where. So it's everything to do with vision setting, it's future facing, there's a dynamism to it. And in the public sector, the strategy is about thinking how you change the future. Sean Lusk talks about reimagining the future. So this idea of having a compelling vision for how the future is different from the now is a critical element of public sector strategy. And the future is unknown. Of course it is. It's uncertain. We don't know yet what is coming. So strategy is also the process by which we deal with uncertainty. And so when we're thinking about strategic thinking as a set of skills, we're not talking about writing a strategy or compiling a document. We're thinking about a way of thinking both for individuals and for organisations. So strategic thinking is a way of thinking about the future for organisations and for individuals. Firstly, it's doing that job of creating a compelling vision for the future. We talk about the rationale in public policy making, or the why, imagining the future as better than today and drawing people towards that. We need to think about how we can provide a framework for dealing with uncertainty. In public policy and public strategy, the idea of uncertainty is allied to the concept of risk, and it's important that senior leaders and specifically strategic leaders find ways of confidently and comfortably working in that risk environment. In the now, we are often overloaded with adrenaline, and this can lead to cognitive overload. So I do quite a lot of work helping leaders and organisations understand that and the impact of it, and looking at how we can put processes in place to insulate those individuals and organisations against the overload that arises. And finally, strategic thinking that has to embrace a whole system. It's about big picture joining up, valuing the relationships and the connections between components in a system more than the individual parts, and resisting the often overwhelming urge to dive into the detail. And in the public sector, this is especially important because of the complex nature of what we deal with. This matters now more than ever. The public sector currently is facing an exceptional burden in the light of COVID to rebuild and restore both economy and society. We are working flat out often to pick up the pieces, and where the private sector fails, the public sector steps in. So we've been through periods in our nation's history of relatively small or relatively larger state interventions, and actually we are currently in a place of exceptional state engagement in most areas of people's lives. So there's this huge burden, gives us a real imperative to get this stuff right. But the demands of the now are the extraordinary focus. So this brings with it a risk of strategic void, individual overload and organisational failure. And what I mean by that is that the function that should be happening at the strategic level often gets missed when everybody is focused on the now. And the risk of individual burnout when it's so hard to step away from the now or so hard to find a rest is really extreme. And those two things taken together are a recipe for organisational failure. It's we need to maintain the capacity for good strategic thinking and good strategic planning, otherwise the organisations are utterly unsustainable. And I mentioned briefly complexity. Complexity means that there is a set of relationships within a system, a lot of moving parts, unpredictable interactions between those parts, and a piecemeal approach to finding solutions in a complex system actually risks tearing down the whole system in itself. So understanding complexity and having a comprehensive system response is crucial, and that requires good strategic thinking skills. And finally, it matters more now than ever because we can't just break, we can't just stop. Despite the volatility and the uncertainty of our current environment, we have to make progress. So we have to think about how we have evidence-informed policy. We can't take no action. So we have to find ways of being comfortable to have discussions about trade-offs and compromises and focus on what is possible. So what can individuals do to become strategic thinkers? Obviously, I would love to work with you and help design programs or interventions or coaching that could help you and your organizations get better in this space. But here are 3 quick ideas for DIY remedies, things that you can start putting in place that will help you get better at this strategic thinking. And the first is strategic space. This idea, taken from my research on incident commands and how emergency services deal with the needs to be strategic in the face of pressing emergency. There has to be a space. There has to be clear strategic space. You need to find and protect strategic time. This might mean blocking time out of your diary or turning off distractions. It's simply not possible to think strategically and juggle the pressures of the now at the same time. So finding a quiet, protected space to just think those big thoughts, to take your eyes up from the now and look to the future is crucial. And the second thing is about having good quality information, being informed and being interested as you journey from now to the future, because we are on a journey and it's about navigating and fine-tuning the steps between now and the future, thinking about the information that you have at your disposal. Good strategic thinking is dependent on good information. You need information both about your organisation and its performance, but also about your external environment so you can make those navigational adjustments as you journey. Good information should come from diverse sources. Don't rely on one source. Watch out for siloed thinking and group thinking. Look at how you and where you get your information from. And don't try and become an expert, because we are looking for strategic thinkers to be diverse thinkers. So rather than focusing on becoming an expert, think about how you facilitate conversations with and between experts in order to get really rich information on what to base your decisions. And there are a whole raft of strategic thinking tools available, but you need to learn to use them wisely. I'd highly recommend the Mind Tools website, lots of brilliant resources there and more resources available on my website as well. But you need to remember that the tools are not the answer. The answer is not the answer. Tools are part of a process. So you shouldn't be looking for perfect solutions, but think about the conversation and then look to improve the nature of the thinking and the nature of the process. Tools must be appropriate to your context and you must be able to use them intelligently. So understand your context, and for the public sector that means that any of the tools that we look to use in strategic thinking or in developing strategy must be fit for complex environment and promote systems responses. So be wary of the off-the-shelf, particularly private sector models in applying those to the public sector, and be prepared to challenge and adapt any of the tools you are using. So I have developed a model called Strategic Space, and I bring these together in this teaching model. You can find a bit more information about this on my website. And also I'd be happy to develop programs for you based on this model. But these are the key elements of it that I've gone through today. So strategy is a separate function within the organisation, but it absolutely must be connected to the rest of the organisation. And good strategic thinking is about staying future focused despite the pull of the now. So looking at the whole organisation and thinking about, is your strategic function separate but connected? Strategic space and good strategic thinking emphasises the importance of systems and relationships. So it's not about doing strategy in a silo, but it's looking at the role of strategy within an organisation. And crucially, thinking about context, thinking about problems and desired outcomes, thinking about the process and the quality of the thinking and the relationships, and resisting this rush to solutions. As I said, lots more resources available on my website, and do please get in touch if I can help you develop strategic thinking capability in your organisation.